Okay, so in this design, we're going to go over the workflow for designing a Michigan splint. So we're going to come over here to Maxilla, and we're going to, instead of selecting flat plane, we're going to check Michigan style. Now, there's one primary difference between a flat plane appliance and a Michigan splint. They're very similar except for the anterior. The anterior, there's a ramp that allows for posterior disclusion when the patient protrudes forward or goes into lateral excursive movements. The idea is to get them off of their back teeth when they are in any of those positions. And that's it. So I'll see how that workflow goes. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my models. They're going to be in this folder on my desktop, this demo or demp folder accident. Click on these. Now notice I held the control button, which is just a habit. When you do that in this, it doesn't work. You have to hold the shift button to select multiple objects. In the previous video, I already designed a flat plane appliance. Okay, so now it should import these. Here are my models, the same two models. And once again, we're going to work through from top to bottom. So first I'm going to click on the splint model, which is the upper. I'm going to go ahead and check this box that just popped up that says use print Raft. That's coming up. I'm just checking that now for later on. That wasn't available until I checked that. Until you have activated the splint model, this little box does not become visible. So anyway, now I can set the opposing. Going to determine the landmarks the same way as before. Mesial lingual cusps of the right molar, left molar, incisal edge wherever you want, and then right along the midline I like to look at the incisive papilla. Click on finish, and then you get this nice little articulator. Quite often I'll come up to the right side and turn it off just so that it's not visible. I don't really need that to be visible. I'll keep scrolling down here on the sorry, I'm just trying to make it a little more. There we go. Keep scrolling down the left side so I can get the next step. So the next thing is going to be the survey model. Click here and then just orient the model however I want it to draw. Click capture view, and then let's inspect the shadows. Some shadows back here, but about the same amount in the front. I'm going to go ahead and tweak it posteriorly because my splint isn't even going to come this high, so who cares if it's like basically no block out undercuts on the front and some decent ones in the back. So why not tweak it a little bit to the posterior so it's not off those second molars too much. And once again, my splint's going to be about that line anyway, so I'm safe there. Hit commit. And so now I have to save. This time it's going to be OGD. That's a occlusal guard demo. Upper Michigan. Name it however you want. But it's just my workflow. It'd be patient initials, the arch, and then the type. Refractory model. As before, I like to have my offset pretty tight. This is the space between the appliance and the model itself, or the patient's teeth. So I like it to be pretty snug. And I increase the undercuts because I really want it to grip really well. Using the materials that I use at the time of making this video, I use Splint soft material, and it's got a little more give to it, a little more forgiving, so it works really well gripping the teeth. And if it's ever too tight, I can heat it up and near boiling water, and I'll make it fit even that much better. Briefly, no more than 5 seconds, just a heads up. Okay, so now I've got, this is the model that the appliance is actually going to be made on. I'm going to mark my splint outline. It's going to be very similar to the last video. I'm going to come here, click on these teeth, and I'm going to roll up around these canines and stay right around the gum line. Now you can do it wherever you want. It's just, however you like your splints to fit. There is no right or wrong. I will say that if a patient is much more class 2, I tend to bring this more palatally. That way I've got a little more support for where the incisal edges are, especially if you're doing sort of an anterior to programmer NTI style appliance. You don't want that to be cantilevering off too easily. And then when you're done marking your dots, you're just going to kind of hover when you get to this big green circle and you get that line that connects them. Click there and it's done. Looking around to see if I see any red or orange lines where it's not continuous. Nope. Click the next button at the bottom and now it just wants me to click the inside, the interior region. Click on any of the teeth, and you've got this nice segmentation of just the parts we want covered. Click Next, and this shows you how crisp the cut is going to be, and then click Next to finally confirm that. Now we do need to mark our curves once again. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out here. This might not be the same way as I did it for the last video, but whatever. Meaning not the exact same spots, but I don't have a reason for it. I don't do anything intentionally different for a Michigan or a flat plane in this regard. So let's do the mandibular. Once again, kind of right around here. And once again, there is no right or wrong. Do whatever you want. You can actually come down here and move these nodes around and stuff, but I don't think it's really necessary personally. Hit commit. So now these processes have happened in the background. The splint shell, the minimum thickness, the dynamic surface is currently happening. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit splint wax rim. Click OK, and there's my wax rim. If you see it inside the opposing teeth, that's a good sign. That means you have extruded it far enough that we can trim it back. So we're going to fuse the two together, and now it's one solid piece. So now it's a matter of making this occlusal surface correct, and then in the end we will then cut out the inside as well so that it fits on the teeth. Scrolling down, we're going to skip these steps. We can use these as needed. They're not, the little check boxes are inside the button, which means you don't have to do them, but they are buttons that you might want to in the future. So at this point, I'm going to click on, as I mentioned in the last video, click on Go to Sculpt. That's if you want to add, reduce, cut things out. I almost never do that, but I want you to know what that sculpt tool is. If you do that, when you're done, you need to click Finish Paint Sculpt so you can get back into the normal workflow. So we need to mark our posterior contacts. Notice the button below it's grayed out, because until we do that, there's nothing for it to subtract. The generate functional surface has already completed. That's why we can technically cut that out, but no point yet. So in this case, we only want to mark the posterior. If we do the anterior, you have just created you will have created a flat plane appliance. We're just cutting out the posterior. If you want your flat plane appliance to include the canines in group function, essentially, then you can get the canines as well, but I'm trying to go for canine disclusion, so this represents the flat plane portion of the appliance. Okay, click Next, click Commit, and now I can subtract it. Remember that the appliance stuck through the teeth, okay, and when I subtract out the posterior plane, it's going to cut out. There we go. So now it's still protruding into the incisor area, but it's nice and somewhat flush just to those cusp tips. Okay, and then last I'm going to hit subtract functional surface, which is going to be the anterior area, and there we go. So now the guidance pathways are all cleaned up. If we turn off the lower model, we can see you end up getting these little sharp edges here. You can use the sculpt tools to smooth those back, but I honestly do not. Just like in the flat plane appliance, what I do here instead is I come up here to Remesh Smooth. Oh, I apologize. I forgot to mention a step. Block out large undercuts, large concavities. That is a step that you could have done. It does not matter that we didn't already do it. In the previous video, the flat plane appliance, I had already done it when I first got there. But it's okay here because I was going to hit the Remesh Smooth button right here just to smooth up all these sharp transitions. When I click the block out large concavities, it's going to fill in this area somewhat and smooth things down. So it's sort of a 2-for-1. Perhaps in the last video I shouldn't have done it. I should have waited, because what was the point? I could just do it right there and it's filled that in and smooth things up pretty well. But just like the last video, now that I've smoothed it up, my occlusal surfaces aren't exactly dialed in, because I did basically take a lighter or a flame to wax, and it sort of smooths it out almost too much as well. So I'm just simply going to subtract the posterior plane again, cuts that out again, and then subtract the functional surface again. So it's still got a little bit of sharp edges, but not nearly as sharp. And honestly, by the time you print it, you're not even going to notice that. If you wanted, you could come to your sculpt tool and smooth those out, but I just don't even bother. It's not going to interfere with anything in my experience. So we are done designing the occlusal surface, or the cameo surface, and now I'm going to click right here at the incisal edge of it, if you will, or facial incisal edge of the appliance, and I'm going to click Add Raft. I'm not going to change anything, and that's it. Okay. Click Join Print Raft, and now the whole thing is one solid object. And last thing I need to do is I'm going to click Finalize Splint. There's two little solver options here. If it doesn't work for some reason, just Control Z, as in go back, undo, and then try the other one. But I can't remember the last time I've had to do that. Click OK, and then it's going to cut out the inside. There we go. So now we have an appliance that we can print. We can export. We can print just like this, and then polish that off, and we're good to go. Good to insert. The last thing I'm going to do is generate a report so that I know what my offset was, what my undercut was, any adjustments I made to the articulator, and whatnot. And that way, if I ever have to make an adjustment, I know where I started. Let's go ahead and click Export Splint STL. It's in the right folder already. Click OK. In the meantime, I'm going to open up Rayware, which is my printing software, or the software that I use with the Sprint Ray printers. Unfortunately, I have to resize this window again. That's odd. I would have thought it would have memorized that from the last time. But let me just resize it a little bit so you can see what I see. And where is this OGD Upper Michigan? Drag and drop it right into my printing software. It's going to be the same for most all printing softwares. And now I can just click on it. Click on Base. You might have to come over here to the menus to find the Base button. But if I click on Base, now I got this little arrow, and the arrow is always perpendicular to anything on her. I'm going to come right to this flat surface, and voila. I can now move this to wherever I want to print, and I am ready to print. No more work. Ignore the error potential thing. It thinks it won't print. I've had excellent success with this. I'm not saying everyone will, but I can't remember the last time I've had a failure. So I would print like this until you have an error and then revisit. I do not like supports. I don't, just because I don't want them all over my inside or my intaglio or my cameo if I can avoid it. So I'm in the Pro 95. I went to the Keystone Splint Soft. There you go. So that's truly everything, and then hit print. Ignore the high chance of print failure. Okay, that's it for this video.